I've been around VR and AR for a long time. I've never really filmed in it myself, but when I was at NBC News in the early 2000s is when people were first starting to talk about AR and VR, and I've seen a million demos with what this was going to be, and I've never really seen it turn into what everybody hoped it would, until very recently when I went to the Sphere in Vegas to see a U2 concert. And that was the first time I really felt that the tide has turned, and now AR and VR are here, and it can be a communal event rather than an isolated, only for you, experience with a headset.
Virtual reality has been around for many decades. The first really credible piece written about it from an academic or a scientist was actually in the late 1960s by Ivan Sutherland, where he described VR as a mathematical wonderland. And so that's the first theory piece. Now, Sutherland goes on a few years later to build something that people now call the Sword of Damocles. It was a VR headset that was so heavy it had to be strapped to the ceiling, and it was super large and many dozens of pounds. One of the first VR headsets. We go from Ivan Sutherland to a guy named Jaron Lanier. Jaron Lanier coined the term virtual reality, and he's building the first systems late 1970s, early 1980s, and he's considered by many to be kind of the godfather of VR. Jaron really pushes the medium forward. He forms a company called VPL in the 80s, second company in the 90s, does a lot of work, and he really is one of the early pioneers of VR. But the medium's been around for a while, and before the consumer revolution that we think about a decade ago when Oculus is bought by Facebook in 2015, lots of academic labs, lots of use in the military, lots of use in Hollywood, but it's a very niche thing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I feel like it's a different experience than like playing games on anything else, because like you're completely immersed in it. I don't know if there's that many other like really good uses. I've seen this stuff where like there's integrated reality and like you can like have a like YouTube video up here while you're like doing something else. But at that point, bro, you're just addicted.
Other companies I work for include Meta. I worked there for almost 6 years, mostly in AR and VR. I've done straight linear film, TV, animation type of work. I've done mostly video games and interactive experiences. I think we're seeing a lot more of these kind of interactive experiences these days, especially in VR and MR. Interactive audio is like linear audio, but times 10, because you have to come up with all these other assets and designs that work with the particular interactive product you're making.
Going to see the U2 concert at the Sphere, I don't think any of us knew what to expect. It was the opening night for a brand new venue. Nobody had really been in there before, and the anticipation was high to just see what these graphics could be and how their music could be, this could be additive to it. Was it just kind of going to be a stunt, or would it really make the music more impactful because of the visuals? And I think it succeeded in that way. And we were standing on the floor for the show, and if people have seen it, it climbs up. It's a big orb, and the seats climb all the way up to the sky. But we were on the floor, and there's one song about 20 minutes in where the visuals make you feel like you're riding a ride, like you're really all in it with this 20,000 people experiencing this just movement. And I guess it's an optical illusion in a way, because you're unsure if the band is rising, the floor's rising, what's rising. Really nothing's rising. It's just the graphics are bringing you into this world in a way where you feel like you're taking a ride at Disney or something. It was really provocative.
What's changed today is the scale. And the scale is there's roughly 20 to 30 million headsets in the United States right now. And each of them cost a couple $100, about 1/4 of a typical smartphone. And so we're at the point now where you can use these VR headsets at a big scale. And so when you're talking about learning complicated physics lessons where you can really turn gravity on and off and use your hands to manipulate objects to get a better, what we call embodied cognition, to understand different types of learning. You can now do this at scale in schools. When we talk about climate change education, where you put on a headset and you go underwater and you see the way that carbon dioxide is changing coral reefs, and you become a scientist where you're actually manipulating different variables and you're seeing the effects on the ocean, you can do that experientially. And so the big change in my mind is not the fidelity of a VR experience. Sure, the fidelity is much higher now than it was 25 years ago when I first started doing the work. But VR was always incredibly compelling from an experiential standpoint, even decades ago. What's new and what's exciting is that we can now take these things out of the laboratories and use them at scale in a lot of these applied contexts.
You know, the people that I've seen that have been developing this for a long time have tried, live music seems to be something they want to key on. And I've seen various incarnations where the camera can either be in the crowd, you know, so you can have that perspective, or you can be on the stage, or you can be in different, you know, behind the drum riser. And I think that's all cool, and it does transport people there. But I've always felt it to be very isolating because it is just a singular experience for you. So I think that's the biggest difference I felt with the Sphere. Like, I didn't need goggles, I didn't need anything like that. I was just taking the journey with all of the other people in the audience.
I really expected that to be a high selling point for VR, concerts and sports. And I think we might get there. I think with the Vision Pro, once that headset's kind of heavy to have in your head for very long, and the battery life isn't very long. But once we get kind of past those sort of technical hurdles, I think a lot more people will go to headsets for concerts and for sports.
I think ultimately that my personal opinion on the Apple Vision Pro, where the technology is at right now, from what I've seen, there's really no reason to justify the price compared to like just the VR we got for like a couple $100 versus like $3K. It's like, from what I've seen, there's not that much you can actually do on the Apple Vision Pro, so it's more of like a proof of concept for like the technology advancing, but there's not much like that actually like physically does yet. Like, I don't really see the uses of it besides like video games. I'm gonna have outgrown it by the time it like progresses a significant amount.
None of us really thought ever that video games were going to be the answer, right? Video games are fantastic and they work just fine on a 2D display. Where I don't think VR is going to be an application is around an application that really scales up from an industry standpoint is in video games.
So I don't know how excited I really am for it. Like, I don't know, what other implications could it have?
In 2019, a gunman went into a Walmart store in El Paso and killed many, many people. The CEO of Walmart has publicly said in interviews that more people lived that day because associates had trained in VR. It was as if they had been there before and they made the right decisions and they made quicker decisions. The challenge is if you're making a device that somebody uses once a week for half an hour, it's hard to reconcile that. So it's going to be interesting looking forward to see how these big tech companies think about their medium, given that those who spend a lot of time working in VR, it's not something you use every day and it's not something you use for hours at a time.